Karen Holton TV presents the Aliens and Angels podcast. Meet experiencers, contactees, abductees, ET human hybrids, and more weird paranormal states of reality.
Welcome to another broadcast of Pyramids on Mars UFO Radio on the Artist First Radio Network. All past broadcasts are podcasts. Find them at artistfirst.com. And now your host, a musician whose music you are hearing right now, who has also had many gigs with Extraterrestrials, Mr. Kevin Estrella.
Good evening, folks, and welcome to Pyramids on Mars UFO Radio. Tonight is Tuesday, February the 3rd, and, as I said, for this show, I bring a lot of amazing guests, and we talk about a lot of important things, we have tonight a returning guest who was here not that long ago, November 4th, and I'm having her back because her story is that important and her experiences. We have returning back to the show, Karen Holton. And what's happened with her is that she ended up spending the equivalent of 3 Earth years on board an interdimensional big ship and learned and spent time with there. And it was an incredible journey of how it happened, and you have to understand in the ET world how these things work. A lot of things happen in altered states, and what happened with her was that she ended up going to sleep at night and then having this crazy dream where she's on board this ship. But it was very real. It was like being there. She's going to explain it all herself. But then the next night when she went to bed, it continued off from that last dream. And then she went to bed again. And it continued off from where it was from there. And this continued for 3 months. Okay? This is how it works. And since she ended up spending the equivalent of about 3 years on board these galactic ships, as she calls it, interdimensional ships, that sits within an interdimensional space where millions of extraterrestrials live and reside on board these ships. And her book, it documents all of it, and that's what we're going to be doing. Is we're going to be doing a deep dive, talking about going through every chapter in the book, and telling her story. So this is going to be really exciting. I haven't been this excited reading a book since I read Susie Hanson's the Dual Soul Connection, Extraterrestrial Agenda. This book, Karen's book, is I couldn't put it down. It was just incredible. And the importance about her story is that because, as we've told you guys for years and years, the Earth is in the middle of an extinction level event. We are at the potential of having a geomagnetic excursion where the sun may have a micronova and sneeze on the Earth, which could destroy civilization, destroy all electronics, first of all, but it could also send everybody underground or having to relocate. This has happened before in the past. It happens every 12,000 years, and we're due. And the importance of her story is that it talks about these ships, and they have resettlement programs. So people go to other planets from these, ETs. Many different races of ETs will then go to different planets to see if it has livable conditions for resettlement. So the reason why we're talking about this is because it's not that they're here to rescue us. that's not the case. We have to rescue ourselves, but that there is a potential for some of the Earth population to be relocated, during these events. But you have to be of a certain type of consciousness. You have to be of a certain level of usefulness. You have skills and stuff like that, but also that you are spiritually developed enough to be able to live in their reality, because we cannot take our ways here on this planet of manipulations and the separation that's happening, the chaos that's happening on this planet. They're not going to take that. That's not their reality. We're nothing like, they're nothing like Earth. In fact, Earth would probably horrify them if they came down here to see how people act, especially all the separation and division that's going on between politics and religion, and everybody's at each other's throats. They don't live like that. But we're going to be talking about what life is like on board these ships and what it's like. And Karen's going to take us through the whole journey. I'm really excited to have her back on. It's going to be really awesome and incredible. So buckle up your seatbelts and get ready for a journey to a big ship. How you doing, Karen? Glad to have you back on the show.
Oh, hi, Kevin. Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me back and for giving me an opportunity to tell your audience about my book, but more importantly about what it leads to as far as preparing us for an eventuality that I don't think we can escape any other way in a positive way.
Yeah. Because, as you said, the people on board these ships are of a much higher level of consciousness than us. They're all telepathic is one thing, but they're also very spiritual and loving beings. And everything is very transparent, especially when it comes down to telepathy and heart-centeredness. And so maybe you want to explain to folks this quickly about, because I was explaining, about how your experience actually took place, where it was happening in the dream state.
Sure. So I want to clarify that at the time I was not using any kind of psychedelics. I wasn't smoking weed. I wasn't smoking cigarettes. I wasn't even drinking coffee. So this is not something that was substance-induced. This was strictly just a whole nother thing. And I also want to clarify that I never had a spaceship show up and beam me aboard with little gray beings and take me someplace. It was a very different, I have a very different perspective on the ET experience. Now, I want people to realize, too, that we tend to want to put everything in little contained boxes, and the universe is not like that. For instance, the big ship sits in transdimensional space, as Kevin already mentioned, but I want you to imagine what that's like. It means that there are beings there from every other reality that we could imagine or not even imagine. That includes extraterrestrials, angelic and other spiritual beings. It can be beings from other geographical locations like galaxies, but it also can be beings from the multiverse. It can be higher dimensional beings. The only thing they all have in common is they've gotten themselves to the place where they've learned the powerful energetic energy that's encapsulated in love. Love is a harmonic frequency, and it's absolutely functional when it comes to beings, no matter what their background, to come together to serve a specific purpose. And the purpose of the big ship is partly hospitality, welcoming beings like myself in an energetic state, and even created ways for us to be there physically. The big ship is also there for training, scientific research, scientific expeditions to other worlds. There are more worlds out there than we could ever even imagine that can support life. They've got birds and trees and fish and everything, but they don't have humanoids because humanoids are created beings, and they're settled and resettled into these various, what I could also call habitats, especially beings who have raised their frequency and learned to put away their warring ways, their anger, their dysfunction, and they're ready to step into that love harmonic. Now our ET brothers, sisters, cousins are ready to welcome us and show us what's possible in their reality. So they're not part of the secret space program. They're not part of the Federation of Planets. Nothing like that. They transmit, I guess, they transmit a welcoming to everybody, but only those who have the right intention, frequency, and health can actually pick up the transmissions and then start participating in these kind of relationships. So it doesn't mean that I was any kind of perfect person, not at all. But I had worked extensively on my health because our bodies are technologies. In our brains, we have all the things necessary to create interdimensional travel. But if we don't know that, we're all gummed up on chemicals and pollution and toxins. That is holding us back. But anyway, before I go down a rabbit hole, I'll turn it back to you, Kevin.
Sure. Yeah, so I wanted to dive a little bit more about going to Chapter 5, Welcome to the Big Ship. So on the ship, as you said here, I'm just going to read a little bit from it. Imagine a complex Venn diagram with many oval shapes overlapping each other here and there. Each oval represents a different dimensional reality or position within a universe. At the center is the area where every one of these ovals in the Venn diagram overlaps in the same point. This is interdimensional space, and this is where the big ship was located. And many different dimensional realities, including what we perceive as our 3D there. So there's multiple people who are in this space who are from multiple multiverses. Can you elaborate a little more about what the ship looks like?
Well, I only have one vague memory of seeing the big ship from the outside, and it kind of looked a little bit like a button, a flattened button, where it was a little bit flat on top and bottom, but otherwise it was disc-shaped, but almost a sphere, but not quite. And around the center, or what, the equator of the big ship, there are these sort of arms that come out and curve around. And that is where all the transport, shuttlecraft, whatever, do their docking. But they're also created and incubated there. So people need to keep in mind that this big ship is actually a live being of itself. And it would have to be in order to travel transdimensionally. Sorry, what was your other question, Kevin?
Well, yeah, and you also the ship is kind of flat, and you also mentioned about that sometimes ships will attach themselves to other ships. Yeah, other ships come and go, and they stack on top or below and become one sort of unit. And this is amazing time socially, well, in every way, because what happens is beings can freely can freely roam one ship or another, go meet friends, go meet family, whatever. But it's also a time where beings come together and share the latest in technology, the latest in scientific discoveries, communications. It's very much like a clan, what you would imagine a clan gathering to be. So you get these sort of, each ship has its own not just state of consciousness, but its own politic, its own spiritual beliefs, its own everything. And each one develops in their own way. And then when they come together, we share all of that vast knowledge, make friends, and we have, of course, festivities.
And it's just a wonderful, wonderful time. Much like I said, like a clan gathering. You get to see old friends, make new friends, visit family. It's a very, very, very upbeat and really a nice change from the day-to-day. Not that the day-to-day is very stressful. It's not at all. But, joining of the big ships is a big deal. We don't have the kind of ways of celebrating that we do here. That, we don't have circadian rhythms, we don't have seasons, and we certainly don't have religion. And those things are not really needed, because when we come together in a spirit of love and high frequency and acceptance and mutual respect, there's a functionality to this that allows beings to integrate beautifully, and just amazing. Better than any family reunion I could ever imagine.
Yeah, well, since we're on that, on that area about, the joining of the ships and what's that like, I'm just jumping to that chapter right now. I might as well talk a little bit about that, because basically it's like these ships attach, like they attach, and then it's like it's like big social gathering with an exchange of fashion, food, and news. Each ship is like its own clan. And then people exchange gifts, as you said here, old friends and family meet, experience new ways of doing things, including new hairstyles, dress, adornments, music, healing techniques, career opportunities, and technological advancements that are shared. Mm-hmm. Why don't you elaborate more on that?
Well, for instance, one thing, first of all, none of them use money. They have no concept for money at all. Everything you could possibly want is made available to you. But trade has become like a social custom or a pastime amongst many, many beings. And it's kind of fun, So the incident that I was talking about in my book was one time when we had the joining of ships. We had this big celebration, and beings from the other ships came and set up kind of an area that just reminded me of a Comic-Con, kind of like little booth areas, and they have all kinds of things, collectible things and shiny things and clothing and you name it, kind of like, I guess, a bazaar. Yeah.
Small gadgets, hand-carved items.
You name it. And so you could just go from booth to booth to booth and look at everything. Anything you want, the beings behind will just give it to you. But the custom is to do trade. And there's no haggling over prices because money doesn't matter there. It's really very pleasant. So I was walking past this booth, and there was all these beautiful not really garments, more like swatches or bolts of what we would consider cloth. And I was really attracted, to the color blue in this one big piece of fabric. And the being came over to me. Of course, we don't talk. We only use telepathy. And she motioned for me to lift my arms, and I did. And she wrapped this cloth around my mid-region. It hung down like a dress. And it had all these beautiful golden symbols on it that looked sort of halfway between sigils and some kind of foreign script. I don't know. And it was just really beautiful. But when I put my arms down, for some reason, the fabric, I can't explain technically how it works, but the fabric would then cause me to have emotional and physical sensations that were very pleasing. So it brought me great joy and made me feel really upbeat and happy. I was so excited. And we knew that this festival was coming. We knew that we were going to be doing the joining of the big ship. So beforehand, and if it's okay with you, Kevin, I'll jump into a little bit about how we acquire the things we want aboard the big ship. I wanted to have something really nice to trade. Now, in another chapter in the book, I talk about a low-technology resettlement that I got to visit. So I know I'm all
we'll be talking about that,
Yeah. So, but when I was there, when I went to leave, they gifted me these beautiful hair combs that were actually carved out of beetle shells. And when you look at them under the light, it's almost like the patterns keep moving and these colors keep blending. Very, very reflective, very, very beautiful. So a few weeks before we had the joining of the ships, I told the ship that I wanted to make replicas of these so that I would have enough to use for trade when we had the joining of the ships. So getting back to the physiology of the ship, okay, you could imagine the air filtration system is a little bit like a breathing system. But there's also a recycling system where when we're done with something, it just goes right into the recycling. Everything's broken down by what I will call bugs, and it produces clean fresh water. It produces a fluid that's a nutrient base for the hydroponics, but it also produces a substance that they then turn into whatever you want. So think of it a little bit like a 3D printer, but a little bit like a replicator as seen on Star Trek, a little bit like that. And that's how everything we want or need is produced for us. And because the ship
you used to create your own clothes.
Oh, yeah, I did. In the beginning, while I was studying telepathy and before I became proficient at it, I spent lots of time on my tablet designing very comfy, loose-fitting, basically like pajamas that I would wear because that's what I was comfortable wearing. And they don't have dress codes or really any codes. It's a very free reality. But anyway, so I had these beautiful beetle combs. And so when I went to the different booths, I had something to trade that I was really proud of and was really unique. And so anyway, when I went to the booth with this woman with the fabric, right, she wrapped the fabric around me and I put my arms down. I got all these beautiful feelings. I guess they're like sigils. You know how you hear that spelling words creates energy? Well, it's really true, especially when the sigils are made from like sacred geometry and certain kinds of ancient scripts. Anyway, so I was so happy. So I went to give her 2 of my beetle combs because I thought, oh, this is a really good score. I want to give her something of value back. But she motioned, no, she only wanted 1. She was completely bald, but she was so happy to receive one of these combs, and she just clipped it onto the top of her dress, and it was really pretty, like a brooch. And we became really good friends. I gave her a big hug. She gave me a big hug. And it wasn't long before we were taking our meals together with our mutual friends. And it was just so, so, so lovely. And I think it's important for people to hear the other side. You hear about all this horrible, people being abducted by greys in the middle of the night, and they got anal probes, and they take their sperm and egg, and then they dump them off with their clothes on backwards. Well, my experience was so different. And so I'm not trying to convince anybody that they should just believe what I'm saying. It's more that add what I'm saying to the mix, and then everybody make up your own minds. But you need to see the good as well as the scary. I wanted to share my beautiful, enlightening experience with the world.
Well, I'm glad you are, because people need to know about these other alternate realities. Because after I read your book, it honestly, the whole life there just felt like home to me. Like, this is more of what I normally remember. Because I'm not from here. I've never been from here, and I came here to do some work. And but the reality when I read your book, it felt like that was so much of my own spirit experience in the past lives of what I remember, and just the culture. And so I know, like, if there is a geologic, or if there is a events that happen here on the planet, me relocating to one of these places is probably where I would prefer to go. I'd like to talk a little bit more, since we're like talking about the ship itself. We've talked about the ships joining and the big parties that take place there, and then let's just back up a little bit more to talk about what the ship is like itself, because you said that the ship is, well, we know it's alive, and it's like almost like doors will open up wherever you want. It's like this ship can morph into different things. And if you need a door there, it'll just open up.
Because it's telepathic. It knows.
Seamless. Yeah, describe a little bit more about what the ship, what's it like walking on the ship, the experience. Go ahead.
Well, because the ship is telepathic, it knows what you want before you could even think it. And it's made up of, I don't know how it does it, but it's made up of what I call self-assembling biological nanotechnologies. That's just the name I've given it. I have no concepts or words or language to describe my experiences, so I'm just using terms that make sense to me and hope that other people will understand. So, for instance, when you want to go through the doors, they just don't exist. But you know where you're going, and you head towards it, and the huge doorway just appears. It looks like magic. If I didn't know that it was technology and that it was scientific, I would think it was like magic. Just the door just appears, and you go through, and then it just disappears. There is some spatial layout to the way things are laid out on the big ship. So first of all, I want to say the big ship is massive. So it's not as big as our Earth, but it's definitely big enough that it could hold millions and millions of beings. There are other big ships that are even larger, like larger than our Earth, if you can imagine, because size is not an issue, especially in interdimensional space science. Size is not an issue. So anyway, the big ship is alive. It's conscious of everything we need. So during my orientation, my buddy, everyone's assigned a buddy during your orientation. She took me and showed me where my quarters would be, and it just looked like an oval kind of room. There's not a lot of right angles. Everything is sort of tubular or ovoid shaped. And depending, just the rooms are bigger or smaller depending on what you need it to be. But there's a certain spatial layout that is available. Anyway, so she helped me get oriented to my quarters. And then when we were leaving, she motioned for me to think of something that she could then to ask the ship to put on the wall so that I would know where my quarters were. And so I just imagined a bouquet of beautiful flowers, and it just showed up there. And you get a tablet, and it shows you like kind of a schematic of where you are and where you want to go and how to get there. And those were issued very early in our orientation process. But later, we learned to use the virtual reality system, which allows us to have communication directly with the big ship. Now, the beings that are born on the big ship or live their whole lives there, they already know how to do that. They don't need any technology to assist them with that. But anything I needed to know, I could know through the virtual reality headset. And there's no big goggles. It's just a little band that goes around the head and two little nubs that rest on my temples. And I got to tell you, the virtual reality is indistinguishable from reality. So the lessons and the things you do while you're there, I always wanted to be laying on my pad, on my bed, because there's no way I would be trying to walk or do anything. It's completely immersive. And so that is how I got most of my training and instructions. And of course, learned telepathy. Super important. ETs are very tidy around the mouth. And without the way we talk, showing our saliva and our teeth and our tongues and our open mouth, that's kind of offensive to most ETs, to be honest with you. It comes across as being almost predatory, and it's a little shocking to them, and so it's good to practice and get good at telepathy very early on, because then your social network can expand, you can get into training, your options open up for you in a way you can't do that while you're still trying to use words, and nobody would understand you anyway. We also, another thing that's hardly ever talked about is shielding. So when we learn telepathy, we also have to learn shielding, and that was the hardest part for me to master, and that is keeping our thoughts, feelings, emotions to ourselves and not share that with the general public. There are, protocols. You're not going to get in trouble if you forget or make a mistake, and they're very forgiving, especially when you're new. Well, I would say they're always very forgiving, but that's one kindness that you can repay their kindness with, is by learning to keep your thoughts private. Unless you want to share them, unless you're supposed to share them, then that's a whole different thing.
You see, folks, this is where, where information, that's shared by some people who don't like, where disinformation is shared about, different ET races, like, where people say that the Greys, the Zetas are all, their telepathy and they're all hive mind. That is not the case. That's not what telepathy is about. Everybody has their own personal mind, but telepathy, everybody, you can hear, you can communicate with people without words. But there's also, as she's explaining, Karen was taught about, private telepathy, and I've learned this also from the Ponte, where they can reduce their telepathic communication so that they're just having a conversation between two individuals. They can do that in private without anybody else hearing them, or they can talk to a certain group and not anybody else hear them. So it's like they have it's like they learn how to control that, and that's what they were teaching Karen. And Karen said that was the hardest lesson for her, was learning how to how to not do it, because she'd be in a room and then somebody would put their hand up saying, "I can hear you," or "I feel like you're leaking." So why don't you talk about those levels? Those telepathy, the telepathy courses that you went to, and the 4 levels that you had to learn.
Yeah, I get into that in great detail as well in my book. But basically, it starts off with me. It started off with me just basically having my virtual headset on and letting the ship, or just letting my thoughts being very open, that and felt the desire to want to learn telepathy. So then what happened is I saw in my mind's eye. See, a lot of people think our imagination is all fake and fantasy. It's not. It's a technology. It's there for so many things, but in this case we'll talk about learning telepathy. So what I would see is a very simple shape, like a square or a circle or a triangle. And I would then clear my mind and only have that shape. Let it just sit in my imagination where I can see it in my mind's eye and I'm aware of it. And the trick is to keep it without any other thoughts or emotions or anything coming in for 3 seconds. That sounds pretty easy, but it's actually, if our brains are like squirrels running on wheels, it's actually harder than what you might imagine. But you keep practicing that. Eventually, you keep the image in your mind's eye for 6 seconds, and ultimately, you're trying to do it for 9 seconds. Once you can do that, you're really moving along. So the other half of the lesson was that once in the beginning, of course, I had trouble keeping it even for 3 seconds. But anyway, when I start to get a little bit tired or not so useful with it, then the big ship would create the image, and again, this is in my mind's eye, of me being in a room with other people. so maybe 5 people in the beginning. And then I knew that I was supposed to relay a message or transmit a message to only 2 of the 5. Well, that took forever for me to learn how to do that, but I did. I kept practicing every day. You know, you think of a concert pianist. They started tapping one key at a time. They never just sat down at the piano and could play. Well, unless they're Mozart, but you know what I mean. Most people can't do that. You have to practice, and you get good at it. So anyway, then I would try thinking of something and keeping it to myself. And every time it leaked out, the other beings in the imagery of the room, because I'm not actually in a room with other people. This is virtual reality, right? They would raise their hands so I would know I was leaking out. And that was the first level. The second level is you start to see, instead of a circle, you see a sphere. Instead of a triangle, you see a pyramid. Instead of a square, you see a cube. Little bit more complex.
Learn about the stunning details of ET diversity and culture, along with their advanced ways of living spiritually, which is in no way like anything imagined here on Earth. Transdimensional, Meet the New Neighbors, introduces you to many different looking ET beings, the organic healing pods, the self-assembling interior of the big ship, my ET buddy and the orientation process, cultural events like concerts and the joining of ships, as well as off-world physical and non-physical loving practices. In my contact experience, I learned a great deal about ET origins, transdimensional travel, intergalactic planetary research, and the various options for resettlement. My goal is to introduce you to the look, culture, intention, and technology of beings which are different than humans, in order to reduce your fear and increase your familiarity so that you will remain more rational and grounded once the ET presence escalates beyond debate. Enjoy reading about my real-life adventures and notice the things we have in common. So you will see that we are essentially many family lines within one species. Paperback and Kindle versions of Transdimensional Meet the New Neighbors is now available on Amazon worldwide. To gift yourself or someone you love, pick up your copies today.
And then, again, you just practice for 3 seconds, and then 6 seconds, and then 9 seconds. And by the way, when you get it right, or you get pretty close, the system rewards you, and I'm not sure how that works, but it's like getting a warm virtual hug. It's like maybe getting a little dopamine rush. And it feels good, and it makes you feel, oh, I did something good. So you not only have your, feeling good about what you're doing, but you also get something that makes you feel even better. I can't explain it, don't know how it works, but it's definitely a very positive reward system, which is very, very powerful. Then you get to the third level, and now you see moving pieces. You see things that might be on the big ship. You see things from home. It could be a spoonful of jam. It could be a walk through the woods. It could be anything. But as you go through the levels, things become more and more and more complex. So you're working with more information. And by the time you get to the fourth level, now you are dealing in actual concepts. Things come together. So telepathy isn't just physical images in your mind's eye. It's also emotion. It's also body sensations. It's symbols. It can be like short little video clips in your mind's eye. It's a combination of all these things, and you learn how to read them with your whole body. You read telepathy with your whole body, not just your mind. And so you can imagine it's very big experience. It's very inclusive to so much learning. Later on, when I was studying in I was studying plants and stuff to get ready to participate in the pre-settlement program. That is how I did my studying and my learning till I got to a certain point. And then after that, you pair up with other beings that are more experienced than you, and they teach you what they know. Eventually, you will teach others what you know, and that's sort of how the learning happens aboard the big ship. So you can imagine telepathy is super important. It's important to feel emotion at the right time and to avoid transmitting emotion because you're dealing with so many beings from so many worlds. It's just better to keep everything in a nice, calm, even keel. Yeah, in my experience.
Yeah. And I can, attest from the telepathy experience that I've experienced with certain ETs where they can they can find information from you, memories that that were from long ago and bring them back because they can read into your mind. But they also share their emotions. They share their feelings, and that's what I remember when I met with the Ponte, and they shared with me their emotion and how I was feeling them. And one time when they were here, I was surrounded by 5 Ponte. Their hands were resting on me. My eyes were closed. I was in a alpha theta state, and the feeling that they gave to me was your family. And that's what I felt, your family. But that feeling, it's so complex. The feelings that it's how do you describe what it feels like, to feel your family? Probably if you ever at a family reunion, and that emotion that you felt with your being with your family, that's what it felt like. It's so hard to describe. Telepathy,
you mentioned
you're able to feel energies. Yeah.
Yes. You mentioned earlier that you felt like being on the big ship is like being home, and I've described it that way many times. People say, what's it like, coming back to the three-dimensional here on Earth and not being able to go there? What's it like being there and then coming back? And I says, well, being aboard the big ship is like going home after you've been away for a very, very long time. The sense of comfort and relief and love is so beautiful. It is very difficult to be back on the three-dimensional level. But, you have to do it because we signed up to be here for all kinds of reasons. You and me, we may not be here from here, but we're here to do a job and to help others and hopefully expand awareness so that more people can have these experiences.
Yeah. And I'm finding it more, I think it's also with the 5D, 3D to 5D split. My experience from going from, dream state to waking up again, it's becoming more and more difficult because every morning when I wake up, I have to remember who I am. It's like, oh, that consciousness, that person, oh yeah, that's where I live. Oh yeah, that's where I work and I play guitar. So it's like, and when I'm in my dream state, I'm like I'm a totally different person in a different world.
Yeah.
And that now my dreams feel more real than my reality when I wake up. And then every morning I'm confused when I wake up. It's like, oh, I'm playing this role again. It's have you experienced that now? Like, it's just nuts.
Yeah, it is. And what makes it even harder is the time dilation. So as you mentioned, this happened to me every night for 3 months of our Earth time. But I had more than 3 years of experiences. I could be gone for weeks, days, months, never know, and then just wake up one morning, and instead of me being aboard the big ship, I'm back on Earth. And I'm also back to my aches and pains and imperfections. And after experiencing that and coming back to this, well, it's really obvious what we need. It's really obvious what's not working. Just the level of health that these beings have. They are so beautiful and perfect and healthy. And when your body is in a really good condition, that gives you better mental health. You don't have all the problems that we're having here on Earth because we're so incredibly unhealthy. That becomes super obvious. And so the thing is, of course you want to go back, but I knew full well it was temporary. I was meant to share what happened, to process it, first of all, on a personal level, because it really was quite a lot, and then to write my book and then to tell people about it, to try to share this reality with other people. But I'm also here for soul evolution. So I have to deal with, and I get into that in my book too, I have to deal with changing the present timeline by making differences. I'll give you an example. Overcoming intergenerational dysfunction. Well, when is that ever going to end if it just gets passed on from family line to family line? No, sooner or later you got to say, no, this stops here and this stops with me, and I'm going to change this so that we will no longer have this family history. We can do that, but it's a lot of work, and that's another reason why I'm here. So that's why I'm not, aboard the big ship every night. That's why I'm not doing all that, but also because of the time dilation, it's a lot of information to process. In the day when I would wake up and I was back in my apartment here in the 3D reality, I would walk around with a cup of tea going, what the hell just happened? Like, it was more than what my mind could deal with. I'd never heard of any of this before. I'd never heard anybody talk about this stuff before. And so I became a social recluse, and I'm still a social recluse because it's the only way that I can organize my life so that it works to my best advantage on all levels.
Yeah. Yeah, and and you're right. Like in the information, like that, what you've experienced. I mean, for somebody that's to claim that your story is nothing but made up. No, like you couldn't make this shit up. It's too detailed.
I couldn't.
It's absolutely too. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I tell you, if I was making it up, it would have all kinds of cool stuff that's not in the book, because I didn't make it up. I only included what I have memories of and can clearly remember having happened with me and in my environment. But, if I was making it up, I would have created a lover on board who made me so happy. I would have included all kinds of stuff that's not in the book. And it's not in the book because I only put my real life adventures in the book. I wanted it to be very clean. I didn't even listen to anybody else's stories over the online communities. There's been more and more in the last 10 years coming out about ET contact, Federation of Planets, people from Orion, you name it, reptilians, all this stuff. I didn't watch or learn about anything because I didn't want my experience to somehow become, well, for lack of a better word, contaminated with other thoughts and other things. Yeah, so I kept it really separate until I had it in its basic form written down, and then I started doing research into other people's experiences. I never had any experiences with reptilians. Well, the only Gray that I have an experience with is Bob the Gray, and he's one of my spiritual guides. I just kept it to myself until I had it down, and then as I started comparing notes with people like you and Sue Walker, and I'm going, oh my God, there's tons of us that are having these experiences one way or another. This is not unique. I'm not any kind of special person. I'm very ordinary. I just had quite a few actually, extraordinary experiences.
I think your story is absolutely extraordinary. Because I don't remember any of my ET, the Ponzi don't allow me to remember stuff, yet they allow things to happen. They allow things to happen so that I realize, okay, something went on. So, for example, I had a concert for the Ponzi, two Pyramids of Mars concerts here in my condo over the Christmas holiday, and both days, the day after those concerts, and keep in mind, I'm in Canada. It's blizzard outside. It's snowing. I woke up with mosquito bites. Like WTF. both concerts, I woke up the next morning with mosquito bites. So it's like, okay, guys,
where'd you take me after the show? You know?
Yes.
And then New Year's Eve happened, and I could not stay awake. I've been awake, since past midnight every day for, on holidays. No, I had to go to sleep at 11:30. I woke up the next morning with mosquito bites. So I spent New Year's with the Ponte, I guess. So and then another night happened the same thing. I woke up with more mosquito bites. So I'm not allowed to remember the times there, but wherever they're taking me, I'm getting bitten by mosquitoes. So it's like that's the only way I know that something's going on, or I've been abducted. It's not an abduction. It's a wellness visit. So I look forward to my mosquito bites.
Yep, that's hilarious, especially because where the mountain they're under, that's where it's quite hot, and you would find mosquitoes this time of year. I'm in Canada too, so it's like, wow, snowy and really cold. So.
Yeah. Well, the other part I want to talk about. Well, go ahead. What's that?
Oh, I was just going to say, I know we're running out of time, but I wanted to know if there's anything you wanted to me to finish talking about or elaborate on.
Yeah, because we're going to have Karen come back for next month, folks. Okay, just to let you know. So she's going to be coming back for the beginning of March, and we're going to be continuing our story. But we have about 10 more minutes, and the last part I wanted to kind of just touch about with this show was what Chapter 4. What is ET like? Not so different from ourselves. I'm just going to read this. It is a shame that most people here on Earth think of ET as either hideous monsters or as white people with long blonde hair. In my experience, these images couldn't be farther from the truth. Although my ET friends come from diverse backgrounds, each race has much variation similar to Earth humans, even amongst beings from the same ancestry with similar genetic codes. There is much diversity in size and shapes of the nose, eyes, and ears, their height and weight, their skin tone, hair color, and distribution. Yet they do not look very different from Earth people because we are all of the same species. Why don't you elaborate more on the type of beings who you met?
Yeah, we are. I'm gonna say that there is all skin tones, and the majority skin tones we would consider brown, from light brown to dark brown, just like here on Earth. So if beings are from planets where they are, or their ancestry, I should say, because they might be many generations born and just living on these big ships. But their ancestry, if it's from a place where they had a lot of sun, they have darker skin. If they're from a place with less sun, they might have lighter skin, or other cosmic things that we don't have here on Earth. So for some, their skin tones might be more what we would consider blue or pale blue, and some even orange. So it all depends. Some quite pink, but most are just skin tones very similar to what we'd see here on Earth. Again, there is no concept for racism. That nobody would even in a million years think about that or use that. They're just beings who are all vibing on the love harmonic, and they feel more comfortable around certain people. They fall in love. They have relationships. They have children. And so there's a great mixing going on of genetic variables. Everybody has the opportunity to find out what their genetics hold as far as what your ancestry were, but there is no rules or limits to the mixing of beings. Pretty well everybody can fall in love and have a romantic relationship or form community, and fictitious communities are as important as genetic communities. So you have people who live together like a family, and they may be no relationship to each other, but they all look like us, but much healthier. Most have larger frames. Most have larger heads, larger eyes than what we have. Their hands tend to be wider and bigger, and their feet a little bit wider and bigger than ours as well. some beings have a lot of body hair, some have almost none, some have no body hair whatsoever. So I want to tell you about some of the more different kinds of beings that you might want to hear about. One is there are beings whose genetics cause them to have these clusters of what pigment, like what we would consider freckles, but larger. And they have these pigments on their face and on their upper arms, on their upper chest. And when they communicate through telepathy, but they use hand gestures, and their spots migrate in order to accent what they're saying. So I thought that was really cool. So, for instance, one time, we probably don't have time to talk about it. Pardon?
They must be part Italian, with their hands and stuff.
I don't know, but it was so cute. So this one being, we were at the food station, and she came running over to us, and she was so excited because she wanted to invite us to a naming ceremony in her world. We were so honored that she wanted to include us. But as she was so excited telling us about it, using telepathy, her spots were dancing around on her face and on her upper arms and her chest, because that's like another sort of a secondary layer of communication they have with those beings. There are other beings who live in a liquid or a fluid environment. It's not water. I don't know what it is, but it has the same oxygen content as our atmosphere here on Earth. And they have no hair at all. They're kind of a blue color. They have webbed hands, webbed feet. They don't walk. They use different body movements for locomotion and for movement. And they have a fairly high spiritual nature. Some of them are shaman. I get into that in my book, too. There were some beings that were shorter than us. Well, I shouldn't say than us, than me, shorter than me. They were barely 5 feet tall. They had red hair. And what was unusual about them is the females have more body hair and facial hair than the males do. So it's a complete opposite switch to us. And they are, they're genetically predisposed to spend their whole lives together. If something happens to one mate, the other one would die because they need to be with each other. That's just it's partly genetic and partly social for them. And there's more. And people can read about it in my book.
Yeah, you're talking about the twins with the red hair, right?
Yeah. I call them the twins. They're not twins. They're from completely different families. They're just a mated pair. But I
you
call
talk about them a lot, though. Yeah, and about how they, they were brought together as when they were infants,
children,
babies, really young.
Yeah, they're matched. Yeah, they're matched as children. Later on, when she becomes pregnant, they have another family move to the big ship. And once their baby was old enough, like toddlers, then it was introduced to their baby when she had it, and the two of them become bonded. But they're not sexually active though until after they reach physical maturity. So at this point, they're just babies playing together.
Yeah, but they become like partners for life.
Bonded for life, absolutely.
Never even physically separated. They're always together.
Always. And like even after we have the public baths, the male and the female stay together and come into where the female beings are doing their grooming and stuff. They always stick together.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in next month.
Okay. All righty.
Yeah. One other thing I was going to ask about the beings on board the ship. Some of them have different pigments, and their pigments express, and there are aquatic beings also that are on the ship that live within like a liquid environment. So it's quite a mixture of different species.
Yeah. And no racism, no way, nothing.
It's not even a concept. Not even a concept.
Not even a concept. All the stuff we do to divide us, socioeconomics or religion or how fat or thin we are or God knows what color our skin is. No, none of that exists. None of that exists amongst these beings.
And also mutual respect for all beings. Everyone has treats everyone with love. And and which unfortunately there's a lot of religions that are not like that, where women are segregated from men, and women are abused, and all kinds of stuff, and the same thing where men are abused too. There's so much separation and chaos that's created by the social constructs of our world, the political constructs of our world that are purposely done to have everybody at each other's throats and in perpetual hateness. Racism. If you don't agree with me, you're a racist attitude. Or you're a misogynist if you don't agree with me. It's gotten so polarized now. We're so much on the other end of things. I've never ever seen it this crazy that's going on this planet. But it's not like that out there. It's their concept, their life like that. And as Karen put it, when they asked her, what's life like on Earth, and she'll be like,
shield.
I want to know.
Shield.
Shield. I don't want to terrify you. And that's true. It's true. Yeah. But as I said, folks, like the life on board these ships is a potential home for some of us who are ready, who will be ready for these type of programs, for these relocation programs, these pre-relocation programs, and to if there is a world disaster, extinction level event that occurs that's of a catastrophic thing. But as I said, only a small portion of the population of us will be ready for it. And I think Karen said something like only 10% of the Earth, per our population, would be consciously at the level ready for that type of, to be able to integrate with those beings, with those societies. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I mean, just imagine if you took the dysfunction that we experience in ourselves, in our families, in our communities, in our political groups, in our nations. They're not going to move that all up to the big ships. They're going to move that to these pristine, beautiful paradise planets. They're not going to do that. No, we have to do the work, get ourselves ready so that we've got value, that we can add value to those movements, And, I know this is going to sound harsh, but if you don't make it and you do die, well, that's not the end. You'll have many lives in many worlds, and eventually you'll get there.
Yeah, it's all consciousness evolution, folks. That's why, I never push anything with any, if somebody asks me questions about MIT experiences, I'll tell them stuff, but I kind of have to, probe them a bit to understand what their level of understanding is so I don't blow their minds up.
Yeah.
I've lost friends because they, their belief is, sorry, Kevin, I don't believe in aliens. It doesn't matter how much I would express, my own personal experiences to them. It's not just I saw a UFO fly over the sky that I visited, and I've explained all this, and my friend was like, sorry, Kevin, but that's just not my belief system. I don't believe in aliens. Some people are like that.
Well, good luck with that.
So, everybody's at their own spiritual evolution in this world of where they are, and they may take them hundreds of lifetimes before they're even ready for, this level. But next month we're going to be talking. Going for a deep dive more in regards to what life is like on board the ship. We'll be talking about, their bathing, the baths. We're going to be talking about, food, what the food is like up there, and then we're going to be talking a lot about the resettlement programs and the pre-settlement programs that Karen experienced. So, there's a lot more to talk about, and we're also going to be talking about sex, sex. So there's going to be stuff to talk about that as well, because their reality is much different than ours. It's a very different world up there. So anyway, it's going to be a really exciting talk. So folks, once again, thank you so much for tuning in to Pyramids of Mars UFO Radio, and I'm looking forward to having Karen back on for March, which is going to be, that'll be Tuesday, March the 3rd. Yeah, so there you go. So it's going to be a fascinating show. So folks, until then, keep your eyes to the skies.
Thank you for joining me for the Aliens and Angels podcast. Read about my true life ET contact in my book called Transdimensional: Meet the New Neighbors, which is now available on Amazon worldwide. Subscribe to my YouTube, Rumble, and X channels at Karen Holton TV. The like button and leave me a comment. And please do share this podcast with your friends. Check out my website at www.karenholtonhealthcoach.com to see my free resources and amazing products and services. All of the links will be in the description below. As part of the Forbidden Knowledge Network, you'll also find the Quantum Guide Show with Karen Holton on all audio platforms. Until next time, keep up the good work.